This way, Gordon.
It means a lot to me to have a multi-ethnic heroine. When I was growing up, that didn't happen a whole lot. I mean, maybe Storm from X-Men, I don't know. But it wasn't commonplace. So to have someone that's my type be in that kind of position is really, really amazing. I mean, I think it's a popular trend now, but that wasn't always the case.
In sketching out the scenes for the episode, we noticed a lack of interpersonal conflict between the characters who had survived from Half-Life 2. Alex, Eli, and Dr. Kleiner have a lot of affection for one another, as you will see in many of the scenes. And while we all value the benefit of strong, positive relationships, we were happy to have Dr. Magnuson around to get irritated by all the hugging.
Due to the number of characters involved in this scene and the cramped spaces, we found that the actors were constantly pushing the player around in order to get to their marks. We developed some tech that allowed the actors to gauge the position of the player and the other actors, and choose among a selection of marks. This not only solved the congestion problem, but made scenes feel more dynamic.
Dr. Magnuson was a result of a decision to bring forward another signature character from the original Half-Life, along the lines of Dr. Kleiner and Barney. As we developed the character, we kept referring back to this line from Half-Life to keep us on track.
Gordon doesn't need to hear all this. He's a highly trained professional. We've assured the administrator that nothing will go wrong.
Though we liked the character who came into focus, we found that this voice was sounding too much like a caricature for our increasingly grim and realistic world. We like to hire actors with the natural voices that we want for our characters, as opposed to hiring actors to create voice characterizations. In John Aylward, we found someone who could deliver the brusque arrogance of the original lines, and also take the character forward into some of the richer and subtler opportunities we foresee for him.
If you listened closely to the Vortigaunts in the Antlion tunnels, you may have heard one of them using a complaint very similar to Dr. Magnuson's here. Their affinity to Dr. Magnuson has caused some of his mannerisms to spread among them, by way of their low-grade telepathy.
Rather than just make up something that would fit our fantasies of a rocket, we designed Dr. Magnuson's rocket around blueprints from the Titan family of missiles. Grounding the details of our world in reality, making them as precise as possible, makes the invented, fantastic elements seem that much more believable.
We intended White Forest to offer a change of pace from the constant action that preceded it. A few moments to reunite with old friends and get to know Dr. Magnuson. A breather before the big battle ahead. However, our first version of the sequence was a logjam of long, talky scenes. Gordon and Alex stood around listening to Kleiner and Magnuson argue at the top of the silo, then rode an elevator to the bottom of the shaft while Dr. Kleiner lectured them about rockets and satellites. They wandered into a control room to watch Dr. Mossman's transmission, and then hatched a plan to get her back. We knew we were in trouble when even the authors of the scene were bored, and no one had the patience for the revelations that followed. We divided the sequence into a number of smaller pieces that could be interleaved with solitary exploration and some combat. This required rebuilding the path and moving the control room upstairs, where the transmission scene became a reward for surviving the secondary silo. As a result of these changes, the White Forest experience is more varied, the narrative comes in digestible portions, and the players are able to play at their own speed, rather than being led by the nose the entire time.
This steam jet is an example of something we call a mechanic refresher. It's meant to refresh the player's memory on how to perform a certain task they may not have used in a while. In this case, we remind the player about using valves to turn off steam in a relaxed environment. In the map just ahead, this trick will be fresh in their mind, and they'll be far more likely to realize they can use steam jets tactically when they encounter them in a combat situation.
In Half-Life 2, when we first decided to make Vortigaunt ally characters, we played around with having a prominent Vortigaunt companion. Because of their bowed posture and semi-servile manner, this individual was dubbed Heap, after Dickens' character Uriah Heep. In Episode 2, we named the prominent Vort at White Forest Base Uriah. In Episode 3, we'll find out Dickens' unused middle name for Uriah Heep.
Originally created as a minor background character, the Vortigaunt lab assistant, known internally as Labby, was so popular with playtesters that he evolved into a fully developed character with a unique name and a special place by Dr. Magnuson's side.
Many of us are fans of Lost, and we noticed several strong Half-Life references in the first season of Lost.
Gabe Newell and Lost creator J.J. Abrams exchanged fan mail, and Gabe promised Abrams there'd be a Lost reference in Episode 2. We delivered on the promise in this obscure area of the White Forest base.
One of the main goals for Hunters was to make the player feel he was vulnerable wherever he might hide. This arena in the secondary silo became our testbed for improving the Hunter's close combat behavior. A classic combat space, featuring multiple exits and many possible paths, we tuned it for a strong cat-and-mouse gameplay experience. While players have many options for escape, the map is designed so that Hunters will never completely lose them, but always be able to pursue and flush the player out of hiding.
Level designers and artists now have the ability to create unique effects as needed, for gameplay or to add dynamic life to a level. In this case, this simple water leak wouldn't have been possible before without involving a programmer to create a new class of effect. Thanks to the new particle system, unique effects like this are easily created as needed, without any programming. This leak adds a visual point of interest to the area and also blocks direct line of sight into the nearby corridor without blocking the space itself. These effects can be placed and controlled within levels, attached to animation events of characters, or called by code. Allowing particles to be attached to objects in the world, emitted from a model's hitboxes, and locked to bone positions allows them to serve a wide variety of functions, such as the new Vortigaunt beams or the burning effect of a zombie. We hope this feature will allow level and mod authors to create a wide variety of effects quickly and easily to suit their purposes.
Dad. So a lot of times we'll try a line in several different ways, like set a different mood for a different scene, or maybe just do a different take on a line. Like one might be, it sounds trite, but you know, one excited, one not so excited, or one a little more pensive and thoughtful. Or suggestions are always thrown out there for new reads, and it's the coolest kind of teamwork. It's not just, here's your script, go. It's, let's work this out, let's find the best middle ground. And everything is always pliable. You know, if it's not working, maybe we'll go back and do an instant rewrite or something. And for me, that's creative heaven, absolutely.
Aperture Science, being specialized in the development of portal technology, fit naturally into the cosmology of Half-Life. Rather than forcing Portal into the Half-Life franchise, we used it as an opportunity to make our world bigger. By suggesting a long-term rivalry between Aperture Science and Black Mesa, we opened up possibilities in both games that didn't exist when they were separate entities.
The Strider Buster, or Magnuson device, started life as a Half-Life 2 weapon called the Hopwire. This was a weapon that would leap into the air and create physical connections via ropes to the surfaces around it. Once attached, the ball would be suspended in the air, ready for action. We never shipped that weapon because it wasn't generally usable enough in our environments, especially outdoors. One side experiment created the Black Hole Hopwire that the mod community found in Episode 1's code. You can still find videos of this in action on YouTube. The black hole version created a true physical vortex that sucked anything near it into an incredibly dense singularity. This created a small dense block comprised of all the mass and matter the vortex had collected, which the player could then pick up and hurl at enemies. We returned to the Hopwire for Episode 2, where we thought we could use it to tie the Strider's legs together and make it trip. But the mechanic of hurling and attaching the Strider Buster was more fun for players, so we moved the weapon in that direction.
This whiteboard art went through several iterations, from highly stylized, to absurd, through to something we believe we could ship.
Fans of Half-Life 1 may remember a gag involving a microwave oven in the Black Mesa lunchroom. If you push the microwave button several times, the casserole inside it explodes, a memorable experience for many first-time players of Half-Life. In Episode 2, we thought it was finally time to let you know whose lunch you had ruined, and give you a chance at redemption.
Go ahead and take the device out of the dispenser.
We wanted players to use the car as much as possible, both to move around the valley quickly, and to run over the hunters as a quick and satisfying way of killing them. To encourage this, and to help with orientation problems, we added radar to the car, which indicated the location of enemies. This made the car a more valuable tool in the battle, and solved the navigation problem once and for all.
One problem we faced in this map was that players would abandon their car in the heat of battle and not be able to find it later. Given the time pressure and large scale of the map, some of these players couldn't succeed in protecting the base on foot. To address this, we started by adding flashing hazard lights to the car, which helped when the car was in view, but we still saw players lose the car among the trees or behind hills. Eventually, we added a vehicle locator to the player's HEV suit, so players could find the car wherever it was.
Episode 2's Rocket Defense Battle was the largest and most non-linear combat experience we had built. It was also the first combat we created that required the use of a vehicle to move from battle to battle. Our design goal was to give players a broad directive, protect the rocket from incoming striders, and let them decide how to accomplish that. Playtesting revealed a number of challenges that we had to overcome, as the free-form nature of the map led to huge variation in success for different players. Small differences in skill or tactics radically changed the difficulty of the experience for players. In response, we had to continually tune all aspects of the experience to support the wide variety of tactics and skill levels demonstrated in playtests.
Many players had a hard time orienting themselves in the valley. Before the fight, we send players to the sawmill without telling them how to get there. This was a way of familiarizing them with the map without any time pressure. Still, the size and nonlinearity of the map was confusing for first-time players once the battle began. The loudspeaker announcements that direct players to incoming striders initially referred to compass directions, which most players couldn't follow because they couldn't remember which way was north. We added White Forest Peak as a global landmark and distinctive local landmarks like the cranes and the water tower, and referred to those landmarks in the announcements instead of compass directions. This helped, but some players still had a hard time knowing which way to go at any given moment. Our ultimate solution was the car's radar, which, along with the landmarks, helps players go where the action is.
The Hunter's escort behavior includes specific formations and flanking strategies. This environment was designed specifically to enhance those behaviors by providing cover and visually interesting paths. In this way, the environment reinforces the design of the Hunter as stealthy, aggressive, and intelligent.
Players under pressure can overlook basic tasks, so we try to make the important ones foolproof. On this map, players often forget to check their health level, but rarely forget to seek out Magnuson devices. We narrowed doorways and set health supply racks right by the entries, so that players rushing in to get explosives would find themselves automatically picking up vital supplies.
The massive Strider battle was in production longer than any other map in the episode. Tuning it required many months of testing and iteration to address playtester feedback, and this was complicated by the fact that every time we playtested, we saw individuals adopt completely different approaches to defeating the Striders. Some threw logs at the Hunters, others relied on their rebel companions to kill them. Some players never sprinted, while others never used the car. We tried to keep supporting all the different strategies that occurred to players so that their experiments with tactics would be rewarding rather than frustrating. Meanwhile, we had to make sure the Strider and Hunter behaviors were consistent and balance the experience so that it would be great for all different playstyles at every skill level.
A great deal of work went into making sure players would see the buildings get destroyed as they travel around the valley in the final battle. While we cannot and do not wish to force the player to see these events, we try to increase the odds that the player would end up in the best possible position for the show. Measures ranged from simply hiding a Strider behind rocks to setting up complex logic conditions that must be met in order for the destruction to occur.
Before we create any final art, we use placeholders to see if the gameplay is working, and to figure out the proper dimensions and shapes for the model. In this level, we used an old pumpkin model as the placeholder for the Magnuson device. After we decided that the gameplay was fun and the pumpkin worked well, a proper model was created using the pumpkin as a template.
We made some small changes to our autosave system as a result of tuning the final Strider battle. Autosaves are the periodic checkpoints where we can restart the player's game after death, so that they don't have to worry about replaying more of the game than necessary. In playtests, we observed that most players depended on our autosaves to restart after dying, rather than using their own quick saves. But because the fight allowed players so much freedom, some players ended up with an autosave that left them in a no-win situation. Low on health and pinned down by Hunters, or too far from the base to defend the rocket in time, some players failed 30 or more times before finally giving up. To address the no-win situation, we extended our autosave system to monitor health over time, and to only perform the autosave if the player was deemed safe for a reasonable period of time. We also prohibited autosaves when Striders were within a certain distance of the base. This ensured there was always enough time to defeat them.
To create a climactic finish to this level, we ramped up Strider density and citizen presence, and then systematically destroyed outer installations in order to move the action as uncomfortably close to the base as possible. It was important to us that everybody be able to play to the end of the episode. but we also wanted them to feel that defeating the Striders required a heroic effort. A balance had to be achieved between the feeling of being overwhelmed and the possibility of completing the level. We made many trade-offs to keep the experience enjoyable while keeping the intensity high, and sometimes this required removing enemies. For example, elite Combine soldiers originally took part in this invasion, running in and around the Striders and Hunters, but this additional level of enemy fire proved frustrating for players, and so they were removed.